Hello, everyone. My name's Sonia Grosso, and I'm from the Ray White Rural Corporate Team, and I'm your host for Leading Ladies for September. Thanks for joining us. I've had the pleasure of knowing our guest that's here with us today for about 10 years. She's been a mother, she's a wife, she's a auctioneer, she's a cook, she's an avid traveller, she's a dog lover, she is an interior designer, and currently one of the selling principals in our office in the small town of Bungendore. Please, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Ellie Merriman.
Thank you, Sonia. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I think the best way for us to give everybody a bit of a sense of who you are and your life would be to tell everybody a little bit about Bungendore.
Bungendore's that little town that most people remember from their childhood, where they used to hop out and pee on their way to Canberra. Whenever I saw them in Bungendore, oh, yeah, I remember that Lake George used to stop there all the time. So it's was about 2,500 people when we moved there. So it's got bigger. It's an interesting little town, mainly rural, but we have a lot of interaction with Canberra as well. So it's a pretty nice place to be.
So in saying that, so the interaction with Canberra, who lives in the town of Bungendore right now? Like what would be the typical type of customer that you're dealing with?
Predominantly defence and public service. So it's quite an even demographic there. And there's still a lot of farming families, but they used to be the dominant part of the population, farm workers, farm people. And now I'd say it's defence and public service. So it's changed radically. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about who's in the family.
Well, number one, Big Banana Doug. And he's sort of life partner, husband, King of Winters, as he'll say himself, and father of Ava and Finnegan. Ava's my daughter and Finnegan's our son. And Ava, as you're aware, has just started working with us. She's going to be a superstar. And Finnegan's at Duntroon Royal Military College studying there. So, yeah, who would have thought?
Who'd have thought? Mm. And obviously there's a third child as well, which is the business. So tell us a little bit about who's in the business there now.
Well, that's a good question because it's very much a family business, but it's also Sally Hughes, who I've worked with for about 12 years. And so she's very much part of the business, and her husband and her daughter are very family to us. And Doug came into the business a year or two after we started the business, and came into, we needed him, he came in to help, and he brought a skill set and he brought ideas that were fresh to the business. So he's got a background in film and marketing and that kind of thing. So he was very much a blue sky thinker. He says I'm black hat and he's blue hat. So he has those big thoughts and that creative side of things. So it's an interesting office now with three of us in there from the same family. So
and we're definitely going to dig into that a little bit, just in the little bit down the track. So tell me a little bit about, you guys were originally from Sydney.
We were.
And then made the decision to head down to Bungendore. How did that thought process come about?
It came about because being older parents, we had two very, very young kids. My son was only a few months old at the time and had been quite a sick baby. So we were very in that family zone of what do we need to do to make our lives and our family and our health and everything better. And Doug's originally from the country. I had very strong connections there and an opportunity arose. And we always intended to do it down the track, but when it came up, we just jumped at it and it was the right thing to do. Everybody said to us, don't sell up in Sydney, you'll never get back in, you're crazy. And not once have we ever thought about, oh, we'll go back to Sydney. It just doesn't come into it. So it was the right thing for us.
Yeah. And before you moved down to Bungendore, I think that what you were doing before that has certainly contributed to the person that you are today. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your career in Sydney and then how you made that move down to the country.
Many and varied career. I've done quite a lot of things that you wouldn't have expected I would do because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I jumped out of school and into uni, studied archaeology. Who would have thought? Took an opportunity then to go off overseas and travel, arrived back 2 weeks later. Somebody said, oh, they're doing interviews for Qantas. And literally 2 weeks later, I was sitting learning how to be an international air hostess, which I did for a few years, which was great fun. I mean, it was the glory days of flying. And after a few years, I decided it was time to do what I wanted to do, which was actually be an auctioneer, surprisingly. And I wanted to sell art and antiques and jewellery, paintings, which I did do for many years. I'd grown, as a little girl, Mum and Dad used to take me to the auctions because they were into collecting antiques and art. And I used to stand there and look at the auctioneer and think, he's the luckiest man in the whole world. He owns all of this. And as it turns out, he was just selling all of this, but it was enough to spark an interest. And I thought it was a fun thing to do, which it was.
Were there many women doing that at the time?
None at the time. It was very, very much a man's world. And I did my license, which was an unrestricted license in, here we go, 1988. And at that time, you had to do the 2 years on the floor in an auction house and a real estate agency and all that sort of stuff to get it. And primary production as well. So I could have gone up and done sheep and cows too, which was pretty fun. But yeah, I did it and it was great fun.
So after you were doing, so you were doing the art auctioneering here in Sydney, and then what was the next step from there?
I slid across into film, which was a funny little segue, but we used to deal a lot with people who were buying set dresses and things like that. We used to do textile auctions, so people who were dressing something, you know, for 1920s or films like Australia and things like that, which was post me, but that kind of set required certain sofas and cups and plates. So I had a really strong knowledge of period appropriate things, you know, what brands they would have had or what costume or whatever. And so it was easy enough, and I just jumped in there and did a couple of films, a couple of TV things, some pretty fun things, and then moved into a role doing the decorating part with Monica Trafficker on Better Homes and Gardens TV show and magazine, which was great, working for the Matt Hambry at that time had that. And yeah, it was a very interesting role. It taught me to work under intense pressure. So a lot of that sort of grounding of literally starting from scratch with a process, which is what we do day to day with a sale. You've got the little spark of idea, you put it all on paper, you make sure that's workable, and then you just go for it, hammer and tongs, and then you finish it. And it's quite a good way to learn to manage your time, to be responsible. But there's no way to hide in a crew if you don't do your job properly. You're the one there to do it. So it's the same in real estate.
With a massive deadline.
A massive deadline. So yeah.
So then, so you were doing the Better Homes and Gardens, doing the interior design, and obviously the work in that part of the TV. Packed up, moved south.
That was about the time. So, which was quite handy because when I was doing the Better Homes and Gardens stuff, we had a house in Roseville that desperately needed renovating. So I was like, here's a set, here's another set, here's another set. So we did that a bit in the houses we had in Sydney, and we were running out of house space. So we went, Bungadore, let's go. So Doug took a job down in Canberra working for a TV content production house as an executive producer. And yeah, we packed up and went.
And when you went down there, what were you doing when you started down there? What was obviously young family, so juggling a little bit?
I realised pretty quickly that I couldn't do anything that I had any kind of skills to do, because I went back and forth and did a few auctions for a couple of international auction houses for bigger sales, which were really exciting and interesting. I did a few in the city for specialist sales for toys and dolls and all sorts of weird stuff. But that wasn't really sustainable. So, and I'm a worker. I always intended to go back to work. So somebody approached me and said, oh, come and work in the office. And they literally opened the door to an empty office and said, off you go.
And that was a real estate office?
Real estate office, yep.
So what was the first role?
Make it happen. It literally was sink or swim. I spent a few weeks over Christmas madly doing my registration again because it had expired, and just literally got into an empty office and had to start writing letters. People used to walk up the stairs, knock on the door and say, oh, is Mr. White here? It was such an unknown brand at the time that people literally thought Ray White, well, it must be Ray's office. Where's Ray? And so we just, we, being both my personalities, had to just get going with it and do it. So, yeah, starting from scratch, completely from scratch, everything.
So
there's nothing in there.
Limited connections in that town at the time as well. How did you actually get embedded into the community? What did you do?
I did have young kids at school, so there was an element of that. And when we went to Bungadore, we did know a few people there, so there was a slight head start. But I just worked, I just chipped away. I didn't actually have any really significant guidance. I had horrible bosses, but they weren't. There wasn't a whole lot of information. So I would literally get books, I'd read, I'd do what I needed to do to try and work my way down a path. And I letterbox dropped, I walked, I did everything. And I didn't do it particularly well. In hindsight, I think about it and I go, oh, I'm so dyslexic. And I wrote letters to people without being able to really be confident there was even a spell check on the old pedal operated computer I used. So I can't imagine what they must have thought when they got them. But I used to just do it and just chipped away. It actually went quite quickly, surprisingly.
So I know you've told me before that there was an involvement with Pony Club and also with the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
Was that strategic? What was the...
Yes, there was. There's an element of that because I think if you live in a community and you work in a community that is supporting you financially because your business is there, you should give back. It's just the right thing to do and you should give your time. And it's really hard to get people to put up their hand and be willing to give their time. And the community we lived in, there was a lot of people who were both working. So it was, everybody's busy. So I just figured, I can do this, when in actual fact, it was probably too much and it really was hard. The kids probably missed out on a lot from me. Doug was always better at doing the homework, making sure they had their gear for sport, blah, blah, blah. But you just do what you have to do.
And I'm sure that there would be many women watching today that would know exactly how that is. Like lots of women in real estate know what it's like to have to. There are times where the kids probably, you feel like you might not be number one mum, but we're actually providing some great things for them.
I think about that a lot. I definitely wasn't number one mum, and you have to be everywhere every time. However, there is a silver lining. My poor kids used to get dragged around with me driving. I'm on the phone, blah, 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 all the time. And now I'll hear Ava talking to clients and I'm going, I can remember saying that to somebody and she's just got it because she's been around it all the time. So it's good for her, but I do feel an element of not being present enough and focused enough. And I was probably very cranky and I probably wasn't the most fun person to be around a lot of the time because I was so busy just trying to pedal and keep things going. So.
But then we instill work ethic and other things. So we have to be a little bit more gentle on ourselves, I think, along the way.
Yeah, we probably should be, but it's hard to do because when you do think about it, you think there are things that you could do better and it's just part of the deal. You spread yourself very, very thin.
Yeah, but we hold it together and that's the most important thing.
That is true.
Thinking about when you were transitioning, so we know that there were some horrible bosses out there and I think most of us have probably had one at some point in time and hopefully that we're going to get one. So the transition from being a salesperson into being a business owner, how did that come about, and what was that like for you?
Not something I had aspired to. I would have been perfectly happy because my nature is a worker. Doug's nature is very much a boss. And it's sort of funny because that's the yin and the yang in our company.
Mm-hmm.
He sort of thinks about working on the business. I'm very focused working in the business. But we do balance out, and we do a lot of the stuff we do. We talk, 6 o'clock in the morning, we're chatting about, our day or our work. And we have our little board meetings, sitting in bed, drinking a cup of coffee with the dogs. So that there's always an element of that. But I hadn't actually thought, it wasn't something I really aspired to. I didn't think I want to be the boss of a company or anything like that. I was just busy muddling along, trying to be a mum, trying to be a person who was really, I was service orientated. I wanted to be good at doing what I was doing. So I hadn't really thought about the business, but then it just all sort of rolled out, and it just sort of, when it happened, there was really good support from the community, certainly from Ray White as well. They were very supportive, and we just went into it, and it just kept going. So,
and what were the biggest things that what did you have to do differently when you became the business rather than a part of?
I think the things we had to do differently probably revolved around staff and thinking like a boss and giving time. Like it's a huge amount of time to train people. And a lot of that went to Sally and to Doug, and we had various people in various roles. And there's things I can do, and I know that I can mentor people in a sales way, or maybe on a sort of that basis of just saying, this is the overall shape of what you want to do, and this is where we want to be, and this is how we're going to get there. But the little nuances of having people work within your business and work productively, I'm a bit of a person of, oh yeah, just get on with your job and I'll chat to you later type of person, and hope they can do it, which is, I was thrown into sink or swim. So I assume everybody else can do that, but it's not the case. So I think that had to take a bit of time. I had to change my thinking around that, and to be supportive of people in the job. If they're struggling with it, well, that struggle is their struggle. I might think, oh, surely you can get on with that and do that. And if they can't, it's very real for them. So I've had to learn to be a bit more empathetic around people's, the speed at which they learn or what they're doing, whether they like it or not. Everybody's different.
Absolutely. I think we're learning that more and more these days too, because generationally people are different too, aren't they? So
yes, they are.
Lots to learn.
Yeah.
So you talked about Doug. He obviously came into the business. Doug, I don't have favourite. It's like our franchisees are like our children. We don't have favourites. So Doug's not my favourite, but he's pretty close. So I do love Doug Merriman. He came into the business part way through. So how did that?
Pretty early in the piece.
Yeah.
It would have been very, very hard because it was girls or women in the office, and we were pretty tight, and we'd been doing it for quite some time to a standard that was okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. And he came in, and he's a very typical alpha male. He arrived ready to fix everything, but nothing was broken. So once he realised that it was actually ticking along, he then started looking at other areas that he could make better or improve or do something with. So it would take a brave man to jump in there. It wouldn't have been an easy thing, and he managed to do it pretty well.
So with your business now, do you and Doug have different roles, and is there line drawn in the sand as to who does what, or how does that work for you guys?
We actually don't. We have a very similar, we're both selling principles, and we talk about everything. There's a natural divide on, there's certain things that he does and there's certain things I do. So I guess we've divided some of the jobs. So, but we're very much in cohorts in everything we do. Strategically, we do discuss things, sometimes too much, but generally, yes, it's a very split kind of thing. We both have.
Excellent. So what work-life balance, is there such a thing?
There's beginning to be more. There wasn't for a long time. I don't think that I'm not the best at stepping away. Like I'm always that person who thinks, if I need to go and do something, I'll go and do it. And I'm not comfortable, I'm not relaxed not doing it. So I recognise now more, because I have to say my family has spent a bit of time saying to me, you need to pull back a bit. I'm learning how to do that better. There's things I won't do at home. Like Doug will say, take the computer home and do the appraisal at home, or do what you need to do at home. And I just won't do it, because I don't want my home to be my workplace. There's enough time spent on your phone that I just want a line in the sand. There's things, I want my kitchen to be my kitchen. I don't want it to be somewhere where I'm tapping out an email. So I am quite, I spend too much time in the office because of that, but it's just the way it is.
So with COVID, thinking about that, what did you keep just going to the office during that period as well?
Had to.
Yeah.
Most of the staff were off, and the people around us were still having to move to a new job, get divorced, do this, do that. And it was pretty instant for us to change what we were doing. And we just worked so hard through COVID because we had to. And the inspections were very laborious, and we had more people looking than ever before. Like traditionally in Bungendore, sometimes you'd open a property, or you might open 4 or 5 in a day. You'd get so excited if somebody turned up. Like rural sales are just a lot more drawn out. Sometimes you have a 2-year relationship with your client because you're there every week for 2 years, or doing what you need to do for whatever reason. It can be a longer process. And COVID hit, and it was like maybe within 2 months, people in Canberra had decided, I don't want to see my neighbours. I don't want to hear them talking. I don't want to smell their cooking. I want to be out of here. And people just started jumping online. And before we knew it, there was people wanting to see rural properties or Bungendore properties, because that was further out, bigger blocks, that kind of thing. So it was pretty quick. Yeah. And we were busy as. So
I can imagine.
A big change for us.
I'll bet. So at the similar time, or maybe just before COVID, you guys had an opportunity to expand the sales side of the business into another location.
Yeah, we did.
So how did that come about, or what was the decision-making process around that?
I think that it sort of bobbed up. It presented itself. We had been talking about it for quite some time. It was something that we had wanted to do. In hindsight, we should have done it years ago when we had a bit more energy. And then it presented itself, and we just jumped in there and thought, let's do it. What we couldn't have anticipated, and the thing that was difficult for us, was staff. And COVID just shook the tree so hard that a lot of people just went. And trying to get people to come in when there was an opportunity for people to stay at home and get an income without working was really difficult, and staffing was really hard. It's still difficult in a small town. We'll put an ad up for somebody and we might get 4 or 5 people apply. So it's pretty tough to get people to come and do the jobs.
So you kept that second premises, or the extension of the sales business for a little while. At the same time, property management was becoming laborious.
Bigger than Ben-Hur. And again, staffing. Sally was being driven mad, trying to stay on top of it. And a lot of our client base is predominantly owners who are going to come back. We don't have investors in Bungendore. We don't have any flats. We don't have walk-ups, that kind of stuff. It is literally homes that people might rent out for 2 years and then come back to. So they're very invested in it. And the standard that they require is very high, which is fine. But it's a lot more work because you're dealing with septics and water tanks and pumps and snakes and stuff. Like there's just a lot more stuff. So it's a harder gig doing that kind of property management. And I think at that time we were trying to get people to come in as support for Sally at that time. And it was really hard. People just didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do the work, or we just couldn't fill the role. So it did drive us a bit mad. And we just got to the point where we felt worn down by it. So we made the big change, decided that we'd part with the property management, which was a really good thing to do. We're really happy we have. It's nice to come back into the office. We all feel refreshed and energized. The property management wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing for us, and it grew from nothing. You know, we started with nothing and it just went boom, boom, boom. But then we just felt like it was ruling our lives and it was too hard. So we just couldn't support it well enough. So it was a really good move to move it on.
And do you think that some of that is because you guys have really high standards and you have high expectations of what you can deliver? And with staffing being an issue, was it your own kind of...
That is very much part of it. Certainly for what we expect to be fair and reasonable, maybe our standards were a bit high. Certainly Sally is very, very particular with not just the legislation, which is followed to a T, but, you know, she's a decent human, so she wants things to be nice, and we all do. You know, we're like, well, if there was times I can remember her going and trying to, I think she cooked somebody's Christmas dinner one time because their oven wasn't working. You know, and there's other times when you go and do things for people just because you know they're in a pickle. And it's just what you have to do. And maybe not everybody does it, but it was certainly what we did. And in our office, we've always had this thing, Doug and I talk about this quite a lot, about supermarket theory. And the supermarket theory is that in a small or in any community, if you can go into your supermarket and stand in the queue with your head held high and know that you're going to be able to go, hi, 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 you know, and chat, 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 rather than go, oh my God, I don't want to see that person, you're doing the right thing. And we always felt that. We felt a strong connection with our tenants, with our landlords, with our buyers, with our sellers, that we could be anywhere in town and feel okay about it because we were doing the right thing. So all the times when we did, you know, go to the office on a Sunday afternoon, pick up a set of keys, drive them to suburbs away and drop them off to somebody who'd locked themselves out of a house, it was worthwhile. So
I love that. That's a really good, it's a kind of good moral benchmark, if you like, for people, especially for us in the rural space where you do run into your customers all the time.
Yeah. When before Doug joined our office, he used to say, I'm not going to sit in the car while you go to the supermarket. It always takes you half an hour to go and buy a bottle of milk, because it was just, you'd go in and chat, 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 chat. So it's an important thing, something we need to remember. So
excellent.
That's part of what you do.
So property management's gone. That was moved on to another business within our brand, which is wonderful.
Yes, yep.
All done very nicely. The clients have got a good experience. That frees up a little bit of time. Then you still had the second sales business at that stage.
So we thought, what the heck? We're moving things on. Off you go. So it just seemed like the right fit. And it's nice to have those relationships within the group where you think, well, that is a good fit. So that office is staying within the group. And we worked hard down there. Doug in particular, it was really his baby. And, you know, he put in a lot of hours with it. So, yeah.
There was some tyranny of distance involved with that too, wasn't there?
There was a bit of driving. I think you really have to be there. It was like when I started in Bungendore, you have to just turn up to the office. And if nothing happens, so be it. Try and make something happen. But you need to be there all the time. It's those people that you don't know. It's that I used to always think that every sale in the region is yours to lose, either because you're not there or you're not focused, you're not present, you're not doing the right spelling in your letters or whatever it was that I used to do wrong. It's up to you. So that was the same for that office. We needed to be there. We needed to make that time, and you just can't be everywhere.
Yeah, you can't be in two places. That's absolutely. So after that happened, how did you feel? Like, was it a sense of relief? Was it a sense of, we tried something? It's probably a complicated answer. I'm pretty sure there was a sense of just wanting to get a bottle of champagne and tip it down our throats. There was also an element of maybe we should have done it before, or we wish we had done it before. And we see so much potential in that office. Like if we had had the energy, or if we'd had the staff to be able to do it, it would just be so good. But we just didn't. So it was the right thing for us to go, okay, let's bite the bullet and refocus. And
having the energy now for the next few years in changing our business, which is a big thing to do. It felt pretty bold to say, okay, let's do this.
Agree.
And it took us a long time to get the business, particularly the rent roll, into a position where we felt it was in good enough shape to hand on. Like everything was perfect. So that took nearly a year of just making sure every document was in place. Everything was squeaky clean. So it is a big job.
Huge. So business is gone. It's the sales business now in Bungendore, truly focused, which is, I would imagine, makes you feel like it's almost like another fresh breath of fresh air. Conversation starts happening with Ava at this point in time.
It does. Ava's been working with us since the beginning of the year. She just finished her degree doing agribusiness down at Wagga, and she had a few job offers actually. So part of me was thinking, oh, don't take it. But she did end up deciding, and we didn't want her to feel we had forced her into the business. So we're saying, look, talk to people. You know, if there's another job out there you want to do, go and do it. But eventually she did decide to come and work in the business, and I think it'll be a really good thing. I think it's a great opportunity for her. I don't know if she knows how lucky she is.
She's probably listening, so now she can.
Ava, it's a really good opportunity. It's a really unique situation for both Doug and I, because we didn't come from family businesses. And so obviously we work in a group that is a family business. So there's a really good little sort of role model out there that we can look at. But I think it's a natural fit for her, and it's a natural fit for us in our business. The dynamic's interesting because it's Doug, me, Ava, and that sort of triangle is a difficult thing to manage. But I think she'll be up and flying and doing her thing and hopefully enjoying it.
Were you all on the same page about her coming into the business?
Yeah, we all were. I think Doug would have been really disappointed as well if she'd not chosen to come and work with us. So there was definitely times where I thought, oh, she's going to go off, and she was offered a couple of jobs in banking and things, and she's quite rurally orientated. So there was a bit of an interest in, oh, maybe I'll just pack up the float and the horses and go off to live in Timbuktu and work on agricultural banking. But as it turns out, it didn't happen.
So new asset, welcome aboard, Ava.
Yes.
So what's the role that she's doing now for you guys?
She's working, she's learning the business, really. She's working directly with Doug and I, and which is an interesting job because your parents who are your bosses, like that's a fine line, sometimes having to say, you know, no, stop being my daughter for a moment and get your employee hat on because you need to do the filing. So there are things that are a bit challenging in that mother-daughter or father-daughter relationship, but we all get on pretty well. And, you know, it's a small office. There's nowhere to hide. So you've just got to do things. So.
And I guess you have the comfort of knowing that she's going to learn properly. She's going to be taught, and have the same sort of standards that you guys live and breathe every day.
Yes, yeah.
So success for you now, obviously success means different things to different people. And I would imagine over the years, how you measured your success would have changed from time to time. What would that look like for you now?
Again, it's something I've thought about, but not really come to a good conclusion about. I think success will be that the business can continue and Ava can grow within the business and it's successful and we can bring a bit of fresh energy into the workplace again. Not that I think it was lacking. I just think we were just spread so thin. It felt like there wasn't enough that we could give. Whereas now I think we're back into it and onto it, and it just feels a bit exciting again. So I think success will be having a bit more of that evenness in the workplace home balance, because that's something we're seeking. We haven't traditionally been really good at taking holidays. So having a bit more balance with some time off would be important too.
Absolutely. You've mentioned Sally. So Sally's been with the team for 12 years.
She has. Yeah.
How important has her role been in that business?
hugely important. And, you know, you've met Sally. She's lovely. She's bubbly and fun. She's very, very warm, but she's also like a super duper, administrator isn't the right word because she does so much more and she is so much more. She brings so much to it, and she's incredibly reliable. You know, she's somebody I know, I'll hear her on the phone and I would never think I'd ever have to correct her on anything or say, oh, you should have said, because I know she'll say it. I know she'll think it. She's strategic and she's smart and she's really reliable. And she's a pleasure to have around. Like, she laughs really easily. And, you know, if there's a bag of lollies or chocolate, she's in. You know, nothing's ever, it's easy, it's fun. It's a nice environment to be in.
Yeah. And so I can't imagine what it would have been like without having Sally in the business all those years. She's just been that real backbone for you guys.
Yeah. And that consistency too is very important. And if I'm not there for something, I know if there was an important call to make, and, you know, obviously the same for Doug, I'd say that Sally is very responsible and very thoughtful in what she does, and she knows the business back to front. So
she's part of the family too.
Yeah, she's very much part of the family. She brings her little dogs to work every day, as do we, which is normal in our office. But it's like our puppy. When she'd bring her new dog in, it was like, bring me my puppy. Can I put my puppy on my lap? So it's it's just very nice environment to be in.
So if you had some advice for somebody thinking about a tree change, perhaps, thinking that maybe they want to continue their real estate career, but, you know, can I do it outside of a big regional centre or a big city? What would you say to that from your experience?
I'd say get your skates on. I think anybody can succeed if you work hard. You know, it's just being resilient and it's chipping away. People forget they want instant quick fix. And I think if you looked at the statistics for how people actually get from A to B in real estate, there'd be a real big drop off in that first few months of people thinking it's going to happen and I'm going to earn all this money and I'm going to drive a BMW and life's going to be good. And they might be working really hard and not getting to where they want to be, and they all drop off. And it's just, you've just got to keep going and going. And I think you can do that in a rural environment. You know, it is harder. Like, I look at some of the sales and the business people right here, and I think, oh my God, they've only done 20 sales this year, and look what they're writing. It's extraordinary. And we'll be doing 70 or 80 and just sort of working so hard. But it's just your environment, where you are and what you do. You know, nobody's any better than anybody else. You've just got to work hard.
Yeah. And it is a different environment. You know, the city agents they've got stiff competition that they have to come up against. They have to be really sharp at all their prospecting. It's a different environment. So hours to get there.
It's all just people working hard.
Absolutely.
That's what it boils down to. Whatever you're doing, you're just working hard.
I think my line about real estate is, it's not complicated, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
If it was easy, we'd all do it, right?
So true.
So thinking about Bungendore. So it's your chance. It's your advertising campaign. It's tourism Bungendore. Why should we come to Bungendore?
Well, apart from Lake George, which is actually very beautiful and has a lot of water in it.
It does at the moment.
It's quite picturesque. Bungendore's surrounded by vineyards, which is obviously a big plus for those who like to drink wine. It also happens to have a few other little quirks, as in Bungendore seems to attract people who like collecting cars. That whole region is just car nutville. I've never ever heard the words, oh, I'm not buying that house because the shed's too big. Never heard those words. And it also has a lot of dogs and animals and pets, and there's a lot of sort of, dog shows and sort of community events and obviously horse shows and agricultural stuff. But it's just sort of that kind of place where they have a sausage dog race there. Like, they have all these things that are just very specific to Bungendore, the little funny quirks of the place. So, yeah.
Best pub in Bungendore?
Depends on the night, I think. We only have a choice of two, and one's currently closed. So I think one's a clear winner at the moment. So it's not got competition. So, yeah.
Vineyards around you? what should we be trying? What local drop do you think we should all have a go at?
You'd be hard pushed to go wrong, really. There's some very, very beautiful vineyards. The Lake George vineyard they've got lovely wine, and obviously Lark Hill, it's one of the best in the world, and it's right just there. So, but there's quite a few around. Without naming names, I think any of them locally, very high quality.
You've heard it here
Cool
first.
climate wines, they're very good.
And finally, Ellie, I think everybody has got a story for a coffee table book about real estate. So what's your coffee table story or coffee table book story?
So I did have a think about if there's any outstanding things that have ever happened. And there's been some very, very funny times and interesting times. And one thing would probably be about doing an appraisal in Bungadore for a pretty nondescript house and turning up and walking in, and it's a pretty normal looking house. And as I walked in, there's the living room, and in the living room there's, like we were talking about show dogs, it's quite common. There was a big long dog cage with sort of big bars around it, and the top where you put the dog and you groom it. So I'm looking at it, okay, show dog house. And the lady met me, and we're walking around the house and we're chatting. We started upstairs, 2-story house. And I'm looking around the house, and they had some pretty interesting art and things, a bit racy. And the house had a really weird smell. I was thinking, I can't quite pick what the smell is. As I'm walking around, I'm writing notes. We get to the stairs, we're coming down the stairs, and I can smell it. And there's a dining room and a sitting room, and they're all sort of quirky style-wise. And the smell's getting stronger. And we walk into this room, and one wall is painted purple. The floor is rubber. There's mirrors all down one side. And in the middle of this room is a stock, like the...
Oh.
So I'm looking at this going, okay. I sort of get it now. Rubber floor, black ceiling, purple walls, big mirrors. And I'm a bit taken aback. So looking at it thinking, oh, great, you've got a lot of storage here. You've got these big mirrored sliding doors. And I slid it across. There was this huge commercial display of sex toys. And I'm looking at it going, oh, thinking on my feet, well, it's great you've got so much storage. That's terrific. I said, do you run an online business or something? Because I'm trying to take it all in. Like, there is a lot in this cupboard. I'm sliding the big doors back thinking, oh, my God, I can't wait to get back to the office, tell them what happened. So I slid it back, and she said, oh, I actually do run an online business. We do a bit of bondage and discipline. There's whips and wacky things. Like, it's really full on. So we get out there and we're back in the living area, and we walk around the garden, and there's 2 sort of mangy old cats, rescue cats. And I'm looking around thinking, where the hell are the show dogs? And I look back at that cage and I think, that ain't a dog cage. And I wrapped up my stuff, and I could not get back to the office quick enough to share that little tip.
Oh my
because
goodness.
I still think about it and laugh about it today.
Tell me, did you get that listing?
Actually, interestingly, they chose not to sell.
Oh.
But I do know that the neighbours all knew about it, which I didn't know. Like, it's quite a private town. And Sally told me one of her friends was a neighbour there, and the neighbours, they used to have these full moon parties, and the neighbours used to all flick off their lights because they all used to talk about it, and they'd turn their lights off and pretend they weren't home and peek out the windows and watch all of these people in their chaps and their leather and their whips and their collars heading into the house for party. So there you go.
Downtown Bungadore.
Downtown Bungadore. Who would have thought?
I love it. Well, what a story, that one and the rest of your story. Thank you so much, Ellie.
Thank you.
What I've definitely taken from today is that you are very resilient. You've been able to pick yourself up when you've needed to. You've been able to keep on going, pivot when you've needed to, and when it's been required for the family and the family business. And it's made you guys have that business that will endure. And you're a huge asset to us. And I thank you very, very much. I hope that you guys have all enjoyed our session with Ellie Merriman. And we look forward to seeing you back here for our October session that will come out soon. Thank you.